Welcome to another episode of Threads of Enlightenment. As usual, you guys know this is my space that I want to honor our guests because I know they're coming with a couple of things that I deem very expensive. That is their time. And Dre, I want to thank you for coming and share some of this precious commodity with us here at Threads of Enlightenment. Many people do not understand the value of it. They do not learn how to respect time and honor it. And it speaks volumes to those that we could look at their life and it'll tell us. The other is the journey, Dre. Thank you so much for coming and sharing that precious commodity as well, because it housed much information and it created who you are today. And so we're honored that you're here to share both of these preciousness with us here at Threads of Enlightenment. Welcome to Threads of Enlightenment.
Well, thank you for having me on, Ken. I'm excited for this conversation.
Me too, man. Tell the people how you serve, because I tell them, as I mentioned to you on the onset, becoming a servant is the prize that we get to live from and through once you've gone through your journey, and there's nothing like it. So, introduce them to you as to a servant. How do you serve mankind, if you will?
Sure. So my background is in the sports world, and how that connects to what I do now is we over here at Work on Your Game, is the name of our brand and company. We take the tools, mental and strategic, to help athletes reach the top of the sports world, and we have translated those tools from the football court or the football field or the basketball court or the swimming pool, and we translate those over to the business world to help professionals perform at their highest level, do so consistently, and make more money. And we've created a bunch of frameworks and sub frameworks that help people understand that, and of course help them apply it and use it in their business and in their everyday lives.
That is awesome. I can't wait to get into this conversation. I always tell people there's a couple of things that we can do with our children at a young age to assist them. One, artists, it teaches them to engage the imagination. The imagination is one of the most powerful tools out there. And the mindset of an athlete, meditation, and all those things are part of being an athlete's life. And so when you learn from a young age, it will translate into your older life, your adult life, if you will. Dre, one of the things, the customs that we do here at President Enlightenment is visit the space we call family. It is a space where we hang out there for a couple of years before we move on to our life to embark on our journey. What was your family unit like?
Growing up, you mean?
Yeah.
Yes, growing up, two parents, one sister. So it was just four of us. And my parents were really mostly about just they wanted to make sure both of their kids went to school and hopefully to college and graduate from college, because neither of my parents, at least when we were kids, they had not finished college. My dad never really was looking towards college, and my mom dropped out of college when she had two young kids in her early 20s. So she didn't finish college till I was probably about, maybe 22, 21, 22 years of age. So the biggest thing for them was they want their kids to be well educated, go to school, graduate high school, of course, go to college and get a college degree. And hopefully, they didn't say this in so many words, but I'm guessing, Ken, that their theory was that if their kids go to college and graduate, they'll be in a better situation and move forward and just do a little bit better than the parents had done. So I think that was their plan. And both my sister and I did graduate from college, and my sister became a professor in college, and I became this. So I think my parents did. Yeah.
That's beautiful. I love it. It's great because my mom and dad did the similar things where they went back in afterwards. There are five of us, and after my mom, I was in high school when she went to nursing, because I remember as a child she always wanted to be a nurse, and she became a nurse when I was much older. So while you were here in this unit we call the family, Trey, what was it like? I know your mom and dad education was the pursuit, the motivation, if you will. What was that conversation with? I'm asking this question. I'm laughing because I remember some of the conversation that we had at our house when we were talking about education as far as children and stuff like that. What was that conversation like with your parents and the motivation, to do better and so forth? But what was this conversation invited to some of those that you had with mom and dad when they were guiding you, if you will, to education?
Well, my mom her background is in education. So she was always into teaching, and she would, even when I was growing up, she would sometimes tutor other people's kids on, some subject in school that they weren't doing too well at, and of course, her own kids, my sister and I. My sister became really good. She performed very well academically, which is why she works in the academic field to this day. And
Yeah.
myself, she had us on reading books and things like that from a very young age. So the reading led to a lot of writing. I'm sure we'll get into that here in this
Yeah.
conversation. But as far as where they wanted us to go, it wasn't really so much a conversation. It was just that our mom was just steering us. So you're going to do good in school, because she was teaching us, like before we even started school, she was teaching.
Yeah.
So she was teaching us reading and writing from a pretty young age. So this is why when we went to school, we were already pretty advanced compared to most kids, because we had already been kind of had a little bit of tutoring at the house already.
Yeah.
And being that we saw my mom, we were young, but I was old enough to remember my mom being in college and trying to take night classes and stuff like that. But it got to the point where she kind of couldn't do it. Like, you got two young kids. I can't keep doing this and work and raise the kids. So that's when she stopped her college career and didn't pick it up again until her youngest child, which was me, was almost out of
Yeah.
school. So, and out of the house and all of that. So for her, it was just, we just want to go to school, get your grades, do well, do your homework every night, all of the normal
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then get into college and go to college and do something. So, like I said, I have a sister. She did so well academically that she went to some of the best schools and got scholarships and stuff like that for academics. Whereas I went more of the sports route. I got a little bit of academic. I got a little bit of academic favors, but not as much
Yeah.
as my sister did. But my thing was more towards the athletic side of things, which my parents didn't really know anything about. So I had to
Yeah.
kind of navigate that and figure it out on my own, which I later on did. I'm sure we'll get into that stuff. But it wasn't, to answer your question here, it wasn't really a conversation like my parents were saying, "Hey,
It was an
you're 6 years
understanding,
old."
if you will.
Yeah, yeah,
An
exactly. It
understanding.
wasn't like, it wasn't like they were saying, "Hey, you're 6 years
Yeah.
old, but when you're 18, you're going to go to college." It wasn't like that. It was just,
Yeah.
they kind of just guided it, and it was almost a natural progression.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
your love of ball, when do you remember that part of you began to experience it? Because I know what it is to get lost while you're playing ball, and it's 8 hours later, 10 hours later,
Mhm.
that type of thing.
Right.
When did you start getting that love for the court?
Well, it was just start with sports, period. It
Yeah.
wasn't basketball itself. So I was just always into all different kinds of sports. So anything athletic that I could do, once I saw that there was a such thing as sports, I was just into that. So,
Yeah.
we would play kickball on the back driveways, and if somebody had a little portable hoop, we would play on that, and two hand touch football and all that kinds of stuff, baseball, whatever. So basketball, I actually didn't really get into in earnest until maybe about age 14, which is pretty late to do
Yeah.
something, playing a sport. But I played a little bit of, started to play a little bit of football, never played seriously, played a little bit of baseball, wasn't really that good at that.
Yeah.
And, tried maybe a little bit of track and field, went to a tennis camp randomly every now and then, something like that. But
Yeah.
the sport that I ended up really investing into was basketball. But it wasn't until about age 14, at that point, I knew I had tried pretty much every other sport, and I said, this is
Yeah.
the sport that I'm going to try to make something happen. And so that's where I stayed in basketball.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm from Guyana, man, and at that age I was messing around with cricket, and I
By
loved
that,
the
I
sport
never
so
played.
bad.
Yeah, never played that.
Yeah, I loved the sport and was training myself to become a cricketer, if you will. So
Hmm.
here you are, you found this particular venue by which you said, okay, I think I could make something out of this.
Right.
As you began to move through that. What was you looked at it and you said, I could make something about this. What did you begin to do, Dre, so that you can make something out of this?
Well, the first thing I did was just go to the court with a ball, and I would play with the other kids, of course, in the
Yeah.
neighborhood, because where I come from, and I'm from Philadelphia, PA. So when you come from the city, especially the East Coast, in the area that I
Yeah.
came from, everybody plays basketball. That's what all the
Yeah.
young men do, because you don't need any equipment. You just need one ball, and everybody can play.
Yeah.
So I would just play with the kids in my no age group. We would all
Yeah.
just play. And what I realized from just some inductive reasoning or deductive reasoning was that I wasn't going to be able to catch up to them, because they had all been playing longer than me. They've been playing
Yeah.
since maybe age 8 or age 5, and I was just kind of starting out. So I said, well, if I'm going to say to myself, if I'm going to catch up to these kids or be better than them, because I've always been a competitor. And I couldn't have languaged it this way back then, but I had the thought, I need to
Yeah.
do some stuff that they're not doing. I had to practice even when they're not out here, because if I just played with them, then we're all kind of progressing at the same pace. So I realized that the local park that I grew up 3 blocks away from, nobody would come out there in the daytime in the summers because it was too hot, quote unquote, too
Yeah.
hot for everybody. So I basically used that time as my practice time. So I would go to the court maybe about 9, 10 o'clock in the morning and practice out there by myself from 10 o'clock in the morning till somewhere around maybe the 2 o'clock p.m. range.
Yeah.
Maybe not the whole time, but that would be my window, because I knew at that
Yeah.
window nobody else would be at the park because it was too hot.
Yeah.
The sun is right
Hmm.
above head, and this is on asphalt concrete, so it's hot. But then everybody would come outside around 5, 6 o'clock when the sun goes down, and that's when everybody would be out at the park playing. So I basically was kind of double dipping. I was doing both at the same time. And I would use that afternoon time to try to work on my game and practice.
Yeah.
Now, the thing is, Ken, we're talking the mid to late 1990s here. So
Yeah.
it's not like I'm looking on my phone for a drill to do off somebody from Instagram or YouTube, because those things
Yeah.
did not exist at the time. So I'm really just kind of thinking things up in my head, or trying to
Yeah.
remember something that I saw somebody do the night before, and then I'm trying to
Hmm.
practice it on my own. So really, I was flying blindly here, hoping that I could figure out how to get good at basketball. Luckily, it took some years, but luckily it ended up working.
Yeah, a couple of skills. The reason why I asked that question, Dre, is because I wanted you to, because I knew you were going to pinpoint it, because it is the process by which we move forward.
Mm-hmm.
One first must make a decision within themselves. Once you make that decision, and I tell people all the time that life is a series of internal decisions,
Mm-hmm.
um, I believe that is when the soul of that man is engaged and not the intellect of the man. And when that soul of the inside says, I'm going to do this, I think it becomes a reality. Then what it does, that individual begins to take the necessary step to make what he had just said within himself to
Mm-hmm.
become a reality. And that's why I wanted to see that you took the step, you began to look what was around you, and you used the opportunity of the court, no one there, and you began to do the work necessary to make you into the player that you wanted to be so that you can
Mm-hmm.
compete, because you had already made a decision that this is my ground, this is where I'm going to be. So that's why I had asked that question, to pull that out of you so that people can see that that's how you move forward. Dre, you're here, you made the decision, you're training and developing your critical thinking skills as well, because that's what you saw someone and you're trying to figure it out. You're moving and developing your mental strength as well. Now it's court day. You're out there, and you start getting on the court with a couple of the boys as they begin to look at you and go, wait a minute, there's something a little different about Dre up in here. So, Dre, talk to us as you began to improve.
Mm-hmm.
What did the others begin to notice? Because they're going to come and ask, "What you doing, man?"
Well, it kind of happened that way, but kind of didn't, because it
Yeah,
took a few years. I didn't play on my high school team until I was a senior.
yeah,
So senior year is ages 17, 18. I just started
18.
playing at age 14. But even that year, when I was on the high school basketball team, I wasn't really playing. I was sitting on the bench
Yeah,
most of the season. So most of my peers from my neighborhood never really saw me as the flourishing basketball player, because after high school, I went off to college. And then when I was at college, I wasn't really in the neighborhood playing as much. So they didn't
yeah,
really get to see me once I became what I would consider good. By the
yeah,
time I became good, I was hanging out on the college campus all the time, and most of the peers from my neighborhood were not there. So they
yeah,
didn't
yeah.
really see me until maybe after college, when I was
Hmm.
home for maybe a year or two. That's when they got to see me, and to them, it was a big jump between what
Yeah,
they had last seen and what they saw then, because 4 or 5 years had passed, because everybody went their separate ways around age 18, whatever direction we went.
yeah,
So when I really started to become good, I was on a college campus, and these people had never seen me before. So
yeah,
it's a funny juxtaposition, Ken, because the people in the neighborhood where I was from, they only remember me as a guy who barely made the high school team, and even when he made it, didn't play.
yeah,
And they knew me from playing pickup. I had become okay at pickup, but the era that we come from. Again, there's
Yeah.
a hierarchy. You play street ball, and you play for your
Mm-hmm.
school, your high school,
Yeah.
your college, and pro if you can make it.
Yeah.
Now, when I got to college, though, these people didn't know me. They didn't know that I
Yeah.
started at age 14. They didn't know I barely played in high school. They didn't know that I had basically struggled to kind of build some semblance of ability on the basketball court. So when I got to the college campus, and at this point, I feel like I'm actually good. I have
Yeah.
some talent. My talent is starting to show at this point. And I
Yeah.
was kind of a late bloomer, but late was about age 18 for me. So when I show up on campus, they're looking at me like, man, this guy is super talented. Like, how he's
Yeah.
probably been good his whole life, right? But they didn't know I just
Yeah.
got good that summer, right? They
Yeah.
didn't know that. So it's
Yeah.
funny that it was just two completely different ways that people were viewing me based on what they knew about me or what they didn't know about me. So
Yeah.
that's kind of how that happened. So it's not the people in the neighborhood. Again, they only saw it years later, and they saw that I had become better.
Yeah.
They didn't know. Nobody really knew the whole journey except me.
Yeah. So being there, Dre, and you're in this new arena, if you will, no one knew you or anything like that. How did Dre begin to feel the individual in this new place? No one knew you. They think that you're a ball all your life.
Mm-hmm.
What was your mindset at that time with yourself, Dre, as a young man?
Well, the mindset for me was take advantage of it. Right? If everybody thinks I'm just this great player, well, okay, let me just step
Yeah.
into being a great player. I mean, mentally, that was my thought pattern. It's not
Yeah.
as easier said than done, but that was my mindset. Just be this player, and I was pretty much the school I went to was a very small school. My freshman
Yeah.
year,
Yeah.
so I was the most talented player on the campus, which is not saying a lot, being that it was a
Yeah.
very small school, but it
Mhm.
was a big step up from what I had been the year before.
Yeah.
So I just continued to do what I had been doing since age 14, was to continue to work on my game, keep practicing,
Yeah.
keep spending time in the gym, trying to get better. I eventually got introduced to lifting weights so I could work on my physical body as well as my ability on the basketball court. But I was always the type of person who would, if there was time and space, I would always go to the court and practice. So when
Yeah.
I got to college, the best thing about it, Ken, was that I finally had access to an indoor gym
Yeah.
consistently.
Yeah.
I was using an
Hmm.
indoor gym. So then I could just practice more. And what was funny is none of my teammates practiced on their own. They would only practice if the coach said, hey, we have practice at 4 o'clock. They came to that. But outside of that, I never saw any of my teammates just come to the court on their own volition just to practice on their own to get better individually. But I had always done that. That's the way that I started. And that was the thing that had gotten me there. So that's what I always did. But I noticed that none of my teammates ever did that. So for them, it was like they had just gotten naturally better just by playing for as long as they had been playing. But for me, I was
Yeah.
doing it intentionally and consciously. So that was a big difference that I noticed. And throughout my whole time in college, I noticed that most of my teammates, they fit that exact same description. They never practiced on their own. I only had one or two teammates, and I played with a lot of different players in college
Yeah.
who practice intentionally and consciously to get better. Where everyone else, they only did what the team required and nothing extra.
Guys, I hope you guys are listening to what Dre had just said, because it's vital when it comes to your personal development. You have to put the time in it. You have to practice with purpose and make sure that you spend, because what he was doing, again, the quality of time, one that understands the time. But this was a statement that a young man had made that this was his path. And he saw how it worked for him in high school, but he didn't get a chance to use it. But when the time was there, he used it. So you have to learn how to live your life and your mind intentionally to get the things that you want. You just can't haphazardly walk around by default and rely on your talents or your gift, if you will. But when you push that little further, you always become a little more efficient, more skilled, yeah, if you will, at what you do. Because where you're getting skilled, Dre, and I know you will testify to this, is in the mind. So here you are, this young man in college, you're watching and seeing how these other guys are moving forward, and you're playing your ball, you're doing what you love. Um, as you're looking out into your life, because we know that you're playing school, you're going to be looking, of course, into the professional world. What was your mindset, Dre? Because you're going, in that area, that playground, if you will, or where the big boys are. What were you thinking with what you were doing, and what did you see and know within yourself that you can accomplish? What was happening with you as you were moving, navigating towards that area?
Ken, over the years, as I going through my college years, I just continue as I already told you about, just practicing on my
Yeah,
own, getting better, improving my game. And
yeah,
I had known probably by maybe age 16 that I wanted to try to make it as a basketball player. I didn't know
yeah,
exactly how to do it or what steps to take, but I just had that as the vision in my mind. I was going to try to make it as a basketball player.
yeah,
So I happen to have one teammate, and he happens to be one of the few teammates who would practice on his own the same way that I did. We connected over that, and he actually knew some people who had played professional basketball internationally. And when I
yeah,
say international, I mean outside of the
yeah.
United States. So
Hmm.
he knew about that path. He knew exactly what you needed to do. You need to go to these events. They're like job fairs for athletes. They call them exposure camps. You go
Yeah,
to an event like this, you play pretty well, you get seen and noticed by people who have the power to help move your career forward. And he's pretty much telling me, Dre, that's pretty much what we're going to have to do, because I went to a
yeah,
college that was a Division III school. So for those who are listening on the story, Division III is the third tier of college sports. Pro athletes usually come from the Division I level. I was at the
yeah.
Division III level. So this is probably explains why a lot of my teammates didn't really practice on their own, because they didn't have ambition for
Yeah,
basketball. They were just
yeah,
playing because they could, not because they were really serious about going to the pro level in sports. They were figuring they would play ball while they can, but then go do something else outside of sports.
yeah,
So this one teammate that I had, he knew some people who had done it. So he basically put me on to what the process would be. So we both had our eyes kind of set on the same thing. We need to go to one of these exposure events so we can, show ourselves off and show our game and hopefully create an opportunity from there, which is what ended up happening. So once I got out of college, I eventually, a year after graduating from college, my first year, I didn't, I worked a couple regular jobs, but then a year after graduating from college, I went to one of these exposure camps and I played pretty well and I got a good scouting report. I got some good footage from that event. I basically parlayed that into going and finding me a basketball agent. And agents work in the sports world, same
yeah.
way they work in entertainment or the literary world, trying to help the talent get a job. And that agent helped me get my first job. So that is I left a lot of details of that story out, but
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
pretty much
yeah,
what I did in order to get on into the pros.
yeah. Once you got there now, because this young kid said something in himself. This young kid at 16, as you said, I'm going to make it in the pro. I'm going to get there. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm probing Dre guys to show you that once you make your decision, it's going to cost you some stuff. There's a cost to getting to your dream, and it's expensive, if you will, from what the world looks at and what others will look at it. But the individual, it is not expensive at all. It is a necessity in order to obtain their desired outcome. You got your agent. You got your first gig. The agent makes the phone call. Dre, you were on a team. Talk to us. What happened to you, this young man with that spoken um, uh, power release at 16 years old? What did he do once he got that call, if you will?
Yeah, so it was I think it was a text message, but yeah, pretty much what it was yeah, my agent had kind of let me know. I signed with the agent maybe in July, maybe early mid July, and then by the end of August, so it was about 6 to 8 weeks. He
Yeah.
had found a team that was interested. He told me maybe a few days before, "Hey, I'm talking to this team, and it was in Lithuania. Actually, my first
Hmm.
job. So I'm talking
Yeah.
to a team in Lithuania. They're interested." Here, he just gave me some overview, high level points of what they were talking about. And he said, yeah, let me keep talking to him. It may take a few days, but I think this is going to work. And then he would just give me another message the next day. Hey, here's what they're talking about. Here's what I'm doing. I'm pushing for this. Let's see if we can make it work. Just stay tuned, stay ready, because once we get this done, they're probably going to want you on a plane like the next day. So whatever day we agree, you need to be on a plane, like either within 48 hours, you got to get on a plane and go to this country. So that was how I was thinking. And at this time, I'm working at this gym called Valley Total Fitness, which
Yeah.
is they're no longer in business, but I was a manager there because I was actually doing pretty good selling for them that summer.
Yeah.
And I'm just waiting for him to tell me that everything is a go, because then I'm gonna have to quit my job. I gotta
Yeah.
get all my stuff packed, and I gotta get on the plane and go to this country.
Yeah.
I had never been out of the United States at that point in my life, at
Yeah.
23 years of age. So I'm excited because I'm
Yeah.
getting to actually do what I want to do. I'm getting to travel, and I'm getting to play a game for a living. So I'm just excited and hoping that whatever my agent is doing, I'm hoping that
Yeah.
this deal actually happens and we can
Yeah.
go wait. So by the time he told me it was actually happening, I believe it was a Sunday. I remember,
Uh-huh.
because at the time I'm still living in my parents' home.
Yeah.
So I remember telling my parents, hey, I got a deal to go play in Lithuania. I'm going to be on a plane in 2 days. And yeah, that was pretty much how it went. So I think it was a Sunday and I was on a plane by like Tuesday. And so I had one day to kind of get all my stuff
Yeah.
together. I believe it was Labor Day, as a matter of fact. So late August going to September, Labor Day weekend. That Monday was Labor Day in the USA. And I went
Yeah.
to Bali and had to tell the manager, hey, I'm going to play overseas. And then on Tuesday, I was on the plane. So that's how it happened.
How did mom and dad take it? How did the family take the fact that this was the route that you picked and you're heading in that direction? How did they adjust to that?
Well, I don't think they didn't know a lot about the professional basketball world. Now they might
Yeah.
know people in America. I mean, they know the NBA. They know if you say you're going to
Yeah.
play for the New
Yeah.
York Knicks or the Lakers, they know about that. But
Yeah.
as far as overseas basketball, people in America don't know anything about that. Even the basketball fans, most of them know nothing about how
Yeah.
overseas basketball works. So I knew my parents didn't know anything about it. I think they were just happy that they had a child getting out of the house, and now they had an empty nest. All right, so now they get to be two adults with no kids in the house anymore. So nobody
Yeah.
eating up all the food, using the
Yeah.
electricity, all of that stuff. So I think they're most happy about that. And they were just
Yeah.
hoping, all right, whatever this is, I guess he'll be good. And maybe that'll be it. He's gone. He's not coming back. So
Yeah.
I think that's what they were thinking. But I don't know, because I know they didn't really know anything about it. So I think they were just hoping, all right, I hope everything's okay with whatever this is. And it just
Yeah.
goes good.
Yeah. Hey
So, yeah.
guys, and people that are listening to me and Dre, the reason why I'm probing Dre this way is because I want you guys to see the journey, because I want you to get an understanding, some insight as to Dre. We're talking more of his internal stuff. You guys may be familiar later with the external, the TED Talks, the books, and all that stuff. But he was made through this conversation that we're talking about. And I want you to get an understanding of him because I want you guys to get into his space, get his books, get all of the things so that you can be familiar now with the professional aspect of him and what he did with the mind stuff. And that's what I want to talk to him about it. And we were heading in that direction because I wanted you guys to see how did this young man get to where he is today, especially with the training and bringing in the tools of the mind. So, Dre, you were on the plane, you got into Lithuania, you got there, and of course, you have someone that will take you around because you don't speak the language. I doubt it. And you're here with all these teammates and stuff like that, and you began as you're assimilating into it, and you began to show them Dre, the mindset. How did they receive Dre when he got there and he began to do his thing?
So the interesting thing with that first playing gig in Lithuania is that most of my teammates and the coaching staff did not speak English.
Yeah.
So we're only communicating through basketball terms and on the basketball court. And my agent, so my agent was an American guy from Virginia. Now what happens in the overseas basketball world is if you have an American agent, often they have contacts who are in the other countries. So basically,
Yeah.
this deal was done between two agents. There was my American agent, and he connected with the guy in Lithuania. And that guy in Lithuania was the one who basically took me under his wing once I got over there. So he's the one who
Yeah.
came and got me from the bus stop, and he would come to practices, and he would have to translate whatever the coach said to
Yeah.
me because the coach did not speak English. This guy spoke English. He was Lithuanian, but he spoke English. So that was how that process was. So with my teammates, there wasn't ever really like a deep conversation because they couldn't speak English.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it was really just all on the court. And I mean, we all know how to play basketball. So it was really just me just figuring out and adjusting, what does the coach want? What's he trying to communicate here? What do my teammates want? How do they play? And
Yeah.
then just getting on the court and just doing what you get to do. Good thing about not everybody speaking the same language is that sometimes you can do what you want to do and you can act like you didn't understand what the coach said. You didn't actually know. So that was one good thing about it. But I had a couple of teammates in and out who did speak English. Like there was a guy from Africa. I don't know what country he was from, and another guy who was from New York, and they were both English speakers. So other than that, though, almost nobody in the organization spoke English, but you would meet people in town that could speak English. A lot of the young people at that time, a lot of the young people did because they watched our media, and a lot of them learned English in school.
Yeah, so here you are, you're in this country and you're getting to do what you wanted to do. You're playing ball. And so as you're playing ball and you're assimilating into the culture and getting into all of the aspects of it, as you're moving through your life, Dre, as you began to expound in bringing and doing all your mind things that you've been practicing all your life, what did you start to do to become consistent? Because in sports, what matters is consistency, coming in and putting the points up every day, every day, every day. But in order to be consistent, one has to have a certain mindset, Dre, when you're tired, because every day you don't want to be here. But you have to put yourself in a state when you walk on those courts. How were you able to do that, Dre? Because where you began to switch into you put on that mask where you are able to become consistent with the points, with the performance, day after day, night after.
So your question is we broke up a little bit while you were talking there. So your question is how did I get myself into the mental state for the performance on the court?
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Yeah, so that was something that I kind of developed a little bit later. I don't even know if I had a specific process for it that early in my career. I would say maybe in the second half of my career, because I started playing overseas in 2005. I would say probably by around 2000, maybe 9, 10-ish, around that time. That's when I started to develop a process for how am I going to get myself ready for the game. This many hours before the game, I'm doing this and I'm doing that. That's when I really started to think about that stuff. I wasn't thinking about it as much the first couple of years of my career. I was just going out there and just playing. I was just playing. Yeah. So what I did start to do was just figuring out, all right, how's my body in its best shape if I'm going to take a nap, because I usually would take a nap during the day during my playing career. So make sure I'm waking up from the nap early enough that I didn't still feel like I was still waking up by the time the game started. So I had to make sure I spaced that out the right way. What am I eating or drinking before the game? If I was going to listen to some music to get myself into the right state before the game, the warm-ups, all the things that I would do maybe at home before we even got to the facility, wherever the game was going to be, home game or road game. That's when I really started to make a process for all of that stuff. But at the beginning, I wasn't doing any of that. I was kind of just showing up and let's just play and let's just see what happens. Yeah.
Why did you do that, Dre? What prompted you to begin that process? What was it that took place?
Good question. So I think I got a lot of that from just reading and the small amount of business experience I was getting at that time, because I had gotten introduced when I was in college to network marketing, which I didn't stay in, but the introduction to it opened my mind to a lot of things about business that I hadn't been taught in school, and I have a business degree. And the teachers were not teaching the stuff that the network marketers were talking about. And one thing network marketing makes clear is that there's a clear process and system here, so you don't have to figure anything out. Just do what we tell you to do, system, and you'll make money. That's pretty much how it works. So, and I like that idea because I'm like, man, this is like a business in a box. That's pretty much what it was. And they did have a clean system. Doesn't mean everybody succeeded in it, but there was a system. And then I always read books. I told you my mom's an educator, so I've always been into reading. I remember reading books like Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki, Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill, Tim Ferriss's 4-Hour Work Week. And Tim is a person who he thinks and he writes in a very strategic way. He breaks things down strategically and process-wise. So I remember reading that book maybe 2007, 2008. And he would explain, hey, here's the process for if you live in America and you want to hire somebody in India to be your executive assistant. Here's the process for how you post a job listing. Here's the process for how you explain to them a job that you want them to do and delegate the task. Here's the process for how you make sure they understand the task. Here's how you check on it. Here's how you train them so that they can do the job that you want them to do. The whole point being, I'm bringing up Tim because
Yeah.
he's one of the first people that I saw, especially in writing, just explain, here's how you can make a process, or already made a process, just use mine. Here's the
Yeah.
process that you can use to set up your things, whatever you're doing. And I, again, inductive reasoning, just figured, well, if you can make a process for that, we can make a
Yeah.
process for pretty much anything. So why not just make a
Yeah.
process for some other stuff? So I
Yeah.
just started making processes for all these things that I was doing, because I realized that a lot of what I was doing was repeat behaviors. I was doing a
Yeah.
lot of the same stuff over and over and over again. So I just figured, Ken, why don't I just make a process out of everything that I'm doing so that I know exactly what I need to do every time, so I don't have to spend time thinking about it. I don't have to reinvent the wheel every time. And once I find a process that works, then I can just do it over and over again and keep getting a favorable result. So I started doing that with my fitness. I started doing it with, you asked about the mindset on the court. I started doing it with that. And at this time, I was starting to create and sell my own products online. So I started doing it with that stuff as well.
Mm-hmm. That is awesome, man. Bruce Lee has a statement. He says, "I don't fear a man who practice 1,000 kicks." He said, "I'm afraid of a man who practice a single kick 1,000 times, because you
That's right.
get more proficient in how you deliver that kick. You learn to figure out the mechanics, all of those different things when you begin to do that, and you are talking about those things as." And I always tell people, Dre, the information, the data is out there. You have to be a student. One of the things that I always encourage someone, that when you're on the path of enlightenment, you are a perpetual student until you die, because you
Mm-hmm.
will grow and get data to become better. One of my favorite words, if you will, that I always say to people is that phrase is that I am becoming. And to me, that means I'm becoming whatever I want to design. It is up to me to design what I want to become. But sometimes, as we are growing in a personal development, a personal adventure, if you will, most of us don't know what that is until we begin to start walking and begin to change and so forth. So here you are, you got your
Right.
processes, and you bringing out the results. Those are around you now are going to begin to notice that, because I want you to talk about how did you transition from the court to, because what you're learning on the court, and I tell people it's life. You're learning life. You're learning the same processes, the same way by which you're going to be successful in life as you are on the court. When you begin to do that, Dre, how did you begin to notice that it does translate into the daily living, the personal development aspect as you are putting your processes together?
I started to notice it because I had started putting videos on YouTube around the same
Yeah,
time I started playing pro ball, and I wasn't doing it consistently as if it was a big business plan. I was just putting videos out sporadically, and once I saw there were players out there who were getting benefit from it, I would do it a little bit more consistently, but not really. Maybe once a month, something like that, or whenever
yeah,
I got around to it. So I started to have a little bit of an audience online. So by around 2009, this is a point where I found myself I was not employed at the time for basketball, basically a free
yeah,
agent waiting for the phone to ring. But I had this audience online of ball players who have been following me for some time. They were just trying to learn the game the same way that I had once been trying to learn the game. They were learning it on the internet as opposed
yeah,
to having to figure it out on their own like I did.
yeah,
So when my phone was not ringing and I don't have a contract offer coming in for basketball, I started to focus a little bit more on this whole online space and what I was
yeah,
doing online, which we now call having a personal brand. At the
yeah,
time, I don't know if that phrase even existed, but it was a new thing. So I started putting content on YouTube more consistently, and this is all basketball related stuff. So I started
yeah,
putting videos on YouTube like every day. And I told you I just read Tim Ferriss, 4 Hour Work
yeah,
Week. In his blog, he had a experiment that explained to people, hey, here's how you can test out a product idea if you have an audience online, or even if you don't, and you want to sell stuff online, here's how to test it out. And it was a simple little 5-step process, and I followed it and started creating my own products based off of that. And the products were just for basketball players, like
yeah,
$4.99 a piece. They're my first products.
yeah,
And again, that the seed had been planted because of that network marketing experience that I had in college,
yeah,
just going through a couple of meetings. and reading Rich Dad Poor Dad, Robert Kiyosaki, and the
Yeah.
whole concept of that book was that you want to own assets that put money in your pocket instead of you being the only asset. The only way you put money in your
Mm-hmm.
pocket is you working. But how about you
Working.
create
Yeah.
some assets? So when I created those products, those were assets because as long as I can
Yeah.
sell them, I can make money. So all those things kind of came together at the same time, at a time where I was actually looking for something. I needed to figure out something because, again, what if my phone doesn't ring again and nobody ever calls me
Yeah.
to play basketball again? What will I do? So this is what I was thinking, and that's when I started to focus more on what became now we call work on your game, which is the whole brand and business, which is
Yeah.
based on those mindset pieces. Now, where the mindset piece came from, Ken, to fully answer your question here, was the ball players who were following me on YouTube. All I was teaching them was here's how you dribble, how you shoot, how you jump higher. It was actual
Yeah.
technical skill on the court. Now,
Yeah.
what happened is the players would ask questions because they started to get to know me as a person. And they're like,
Yeah.
well, I don't know who this guy is. This random guy on the internet. He's putting out videos and he's looks like he can play, but I never heard
Yeah.
of him before. So where'd you come from? Who are you? So they would start to ask about my background. So all the stuff that we've been talking about, I would eventually share with them through
Yeah.
videos or through comments. I was a share. I only played 1 year high school. I walked on Division III. Now I play
Yeah.
overseas. And so when people put that together, they're like, it was actually kind of interesting because most people
Yeah.
who only play 1 year high school don't even play in
Don't
college,
go. Yeah.
right? And most people
Yeah.
who play at Division III level of college don't play in the pros. So
Yeah.
they kind of defied the odds through my story. And once people realized that, they started asking questions about my thought process. So
Yeah.
yes, they could see that I can play. That was obvious through the videos, but you can't tell somebody's mindset. You can't see somebody's mindset. You can tell, but you
Yeah.
can't see it. So
Yeah.
they started to ask me questions about that. Like, man, how do you move yourself to come to the gym and practice every day? Or
Yeah.
how do you get the confidence to perform in the game the same way that you perform in practice? Or you got cut from the team 3 times, you walked on in college. How'd you decide to keep trying despite the fact
Yeah.
that you had all this, quote unquote, evidence in front of you that you probably shouldn't keep trying?
Yeah.
Or how do you get started even doing any of this stuff, like playing basketball professionally? Or if you want to walk on to play in college, how do you do it? Or if you want to get known on the internet, because being known on the internet was now starting to become a
Sort of
career
thing. Yeah.
aspiration. Like now
Mm-hmm.
kids are growing up wanting to be an internet person,
Yeah.
not being a firefighter or a police officer like in our era.
Yeah.
So I started answering those questions, and that's where the whole work on your game philosophy started to be formulated because I was
Yeah.
talking about discipline, confidence, mental toughness, and personal initiative. So when I started talking about those topics, that's when the basketball players, first of all, said, man, the way you talk about mindset is like it's even better than the way you explain dribbling and shooting. And
Yeah.
then people who didn't play basketball started finding the mindset content that I was making, Ken. And
Yeah.
they would say, well, Dre, I don't even play basketball. But the mindset stuff that you talk about is fully applicable to people
Yeah.
who don't play sports as well as the people who do play sports. So that's where the seed got planted in my mind that I could take this piece of what I was doing and I could serve way outside of the realm of just sports with it.
Yeah.
So that's where
Yeah.
that started.
Yeah. I always tell people, and Dre's story shows this so plainly. Sometimes we don't get the Bob Marley song, one door open, one closed, another one open.
Mm.
One is closed and the other one shut. Sometimes there's a reason behind the door being closed. And sometimes you have to go inside to find that out. And the other things, I remember Acres of Diamond that they talked about. You have to learn what you have in order to make a living or get, because I was told a story. I remember this story about this gentleman from reading back in the day, one of the books that talked about he sold his land and he's out
Mm.
digging for diamond, not knowing that on his land was
Right.
acres of diamond. And
Mm.
so you and I have to learn to look inside because I tell people each one of us came here with a gift. We have something of value. You need to find out what that thing is so that you can then begin to use it to serve others and become that servant. And so here you are, you had the opportunity. Talk to me about that first book. You're on right now, you're just on the YouTube and stuff like that, getting conversation from others. But things are happening inside you, right? We didn't talk into some of the hard stuff because Dre didn't. I'm sure being out of work, number one, will mess with any mind, and you have to learn how to manage that and walk through those things. So, Dre, talk to me as you're doing all of this. How did the thought of the first book came in? It says, let me put this down because I know everyone is coming, but you still have to think about putting it down and putting it to pen to paper, if you will.
The first book came about because self-publishing was becoming ubiquitous at this
Yeah,
time. And I had heard of self-publishing and I'd always been writing. So I had been blogging actually is just as long as I've been on YouTube. It's just the
yeah,
YouTube drew more attention, but I had always been blogging because I've always been a writer and a reader. So when I saw that self-publishing was a thing, and because I saw all the basketball players were asking me questions about my background, I figured, why not just write a book that'll be
yeah,
my story, just from where I started up through my college years. And that was my first book. It's called Buy a Game, and it's all about how I started basketball up through my college years. That's all I explained in that book. And it's the only one of my books that is a narrative. That's really
yeah,
just a story. Everything else is more self-help, no technical stuff. So that's where that book first came from. And I only put that book out, not even on Amazon. I put it out for free and just let people download it because I
yeah,
learned how to take a document, make it into a PDF. And this was all a relatively new thing at the time.
yeah,
So that was the first book that I put out. And I put it out just for the reason of a lot of people want to know my background, and I knew there were enough that they would all go read this. And I had a lot of, I had athletes in my audience. So it's not like these people came to me because they wanted to read a book. And a
yeah,
lot of them didn't read. And
yeah,
they were people who would say to me, Dre, I never read books, but I read your book
yeah,
because they had connected with me through the basketball and I was giving them what they valued. So they were willing to sit down and read. And because a narrative book is a lot easier to read than just an informational book because you're just, hopefully it's a page turner. You want to keep turning the page to find out what happens next. So
yeah.
that was how my first book came about.
And the concept of the name, work on your game. How did that come about? How did it come about, Dre? Was it you? Was it someone, one of your people? What was it that made that name stood out to you?
So the name of the first book, Buy a Game, came from one of my middle school classmates who I'd asked him for some advice right before
Yeah,
graduation. Like, hey, how do I get better? He said, well, you got to stop playing scared. Number one. Number two, you need to buy a game.
yeah,
And buy a game just meant you have no skills. You got to get some skills for
yeah.
basketball. So I just
Hmm.
kept that advice and took it to heart. And then over the years, as I continued to progress and get better, the concept work on your game, that actually just came from something that it might have been subconsciously planted in my head, but really it came
Yeah,
from all the players who were asking me questions by that point
yeah,
of questions of advice for how to get better at basketball. Because at this
yeah,
point now, I got a nice size audience on YouTube of basketball players watching my stuff and wanting help.
yeah,
And I made a video once, and I was just saying to players, "Well, the reason that many of you are not getting better because you're watching YouTube more than you're practicing." Or you're hanging on a corner, you're playing video games, you're not spending the time to actually practice, but you're watching the videos. So
yeah,
this explains why your improvement is going so slowly. So I said to them, you need to just get off YouTube and go work on your game. And when I said that, people really liked the phrase, Ken, and people would repeat the phrase back. And I saw the response people were giving to that phrase. So
yeah,
now I just started using it more in my content. I would just say, work on your game. I just started saying
yeah,
it more often. And then I realized, like, hey, I could name everything that I'm doing.
yeah,
I could put it all under the umbrella of work on your game because I never wanted to pigeonhole myself just into the sports lane.
yeah,
But the phrase work on your game doesn't say sports. It just says
yeah,
work on your game because
yeah,
everybody has a game.
yeah,
So it was actually a great slogan, a great phrase because it encompasses everything that we've been talking about up to this point and everything I had been doing and eventually did do by just coming up with that phrase, work on your game. And then that's
yeah.
when I branded it, trademarked it, all of that
Yeah.
stuff.
That's
Yeah.
that's your brand right there.
Mhm.
I love it. What I wanted you to do now is to whet the people's appetite in this sense, Dre. I want you to talk to them as invite them into your process. You don't have to go into detail because we want them to come into your space. I want them to get your books. I want them to buy all the things that you're get into his space, man, because he will help you to work on your game, as he says. And so But just give us a little flavor, if you will, of the processes that when one comes into your space, Dre, what can I expect as I'm coming into your world from the outside? What is there to greet me, if you will, once I get into your space?
Sure. So over here at Work on Your Game, we have a simple 4-part framework that is based around mindset, which is the foundational piece. That's just the way you think, the way you
Yeah.
approach life, the way you see things is the mindset. Second piece is strategy. That's a plan of action. What are we going to do? Who, what, when, where, why, how? All of those things are covered under the strategy. Just breaking down, deconstructing where you want to get to and deconstructing it back to where you are right now. Third piece is the system. How do we execute on our strategy consistently and in a way that is duplicatable and your outcomes are predictable? And then the last piece is the accountability. How do we make sure that everything and everyone is and are doing their job as they're supposed to, and we make any necessary adjustments as they come up? So that four part framework: mindset, strategy, systems, and accountability. That is what we do at Work on Your Game.
Hey guys, you heard the man. And I love the slogan because within that it encompasses everything that you will be doing within those framework that he gave you. Is that you are working on your game to lift that game up to change your life. It starts here in your thoughts. Everything that you and I see on this planet here originated, other than the ones that God created, but it came out of his thought. He said, "Let us make man in my image and in our image." And so he had to think
Mhm.
about what he wanted, and then he came out. So everything that is on this planet came out from the thought. So you have to learn how to manage that thought. I always give you the advice that because I tell them, I grew up in a church,
Mhm.
and Jesus said to his disciples, "Take no thought saying." And to me, when I started looking back at I went into the original language to what he was talking about. He says, "Do not agree with every thought that comes into your mind."
Mhm.
And so that means that I have the ability to pick and choose which ones I want to manifest, because which one you
Right.
pick will manifest, because God said, "I want light." And he said, "Let there be light." And guess what? There was light. And so we're following the same example, the same model, because he had a business plan before he started. The business plan was all done, and then he said, "Let's do this." And so
Mhm.
Dre gave you his plan, his process by which he will help you to work on your game. And I invite you all. I'm going to provide everything for you guys to get access to him, because I'm excited about this conversation, because he laid it out for you. And you guys need to change. I have someone here that will help you change. And so we'll give you all of this information so that you can become the best human spirit while you're here on this planet, and change your world. Dre, man, thank you for coming to Threads of Enlightenment. Thank you so much, sir.
Well, thank you for having me on, Ken. I really appreciate the opportunity. Thank you for sharing your platform.
My pleasure, man. And again, we'll give you everything, the listener everything, so that they can get to you. And like I said, I can't wait for them to get in there and change their life. So you have a good one, man. Enjoy.
I appreciate it. Thank you again.
No problem.